By 1967, tiny Israel had fought numerous wars, absorbed over 1 million immigrants, and emerged on the international stage, all within just 19 years of its founding. However, Jerusalem was notably divided between Israel and the Jordanian-occupied West Bank. In the north, Syria had begun diverting water away from Israel's national water carrier, dramatically increasing tensions. Border clashes had ensued in the north, with Syria firing on Israeli villages, and Israel retaliating by destroying Syrian equipment. In the spring of 1967, the Soviets falsely told Egypt and Syria that Israel had brought troops to the north of the country in preparation for an offensive attack. Although denied by both Israel and the United States, and PM Eshkol offering the Soviet ambassador to visit the area for himself, Syria and Egypt still believed these claims. During Israel's independence parade, Yitzhak Rabin was informed that Egypt's armored vehicles had entered into the Sinai. All hope for a peaceful resolution was destroyed once Cairo radio announced that their troops were, quote, in a complete state of readiness for a war, and Naser declared, "It is our duty to prepare for the final battle in Palestine." Throughout the next 3 weeks, called the Hamtanah in Israel, Egypt sent 75,000 men, 100 tanks, and 150 armored personnel carriers into the Sinai. Back during the Suez Crisis in 1956, Israel had captured the entire Sinai with the help of Britain and France, but had eventually ceded the territory to the United Nations. On May 16th, Naser ordered thousands of UN troops to leave the Sinai Peninsula, who had been sent to prevent an Egyptian invasion of Israel and to keep the Straits of Tiran open. Within 3 days, all of the UN troops had left, proving to Israel that the UN was not going to protect Israel against a full-scale invasion. Abba Eban left Israel to meet with Gamal, who refused to help Israel and declared that no matter what, they could not shoot first. Great Britain wasn't much help either, with Harold Wilson slowly condemning the illegal closing of Tiran. Finally, Eban stopped in the United States, who, a decade earlier, had promised Israel's right to self-defense. Lyndon Johnson agreed that Egypt's actions were illegal, but the United States was busy in its war with Vietnam. On May 29th, Jordan's King Hussein flew to Cairo and signed a defense pact with Egypt after having signed one with Syria just a year earlier. Israel had tried to build the relationship with Jordan, and for the past 19 years, albeit with small Palestinian invasions, there had been general peace between the two neighbors, but all of that had just evaporated. The next day, Iraqi troops arrived in the Sinai. Israel braced for a 3-front invasion. In New York, over 150,000 people gathered in support of Israel, raising over $307 million. But by June 1st, it was clear that Tehran would not be reopened. The unity government agreed that some action needed to be taken. On Friday, they agreed to go to war. On Saturday, war plans were presented. Then on Sunday, Moshe Dayan presented his proposal. Egypt had over 100,000 troops and 900 tanks. Syria had 75,000 men and 400 tanks. Jordan had 32,000 troops and 300 tanks. In total, the nation of 2 million was up against 207,000 soldiers, 700 aircraft, and 1,600 tanks. Israel could fully mobilize with slightly more troops, but only 800 tanks and just 300 planes. On the morning of June 5th at 7 a.m., the same time the Egyptian pilots were eating breakfast, Israel sent 200 jets into the Sinai. In just 3 hours, Egypt lost hundreds of aircraft, 1/3 of all of their pilots, 13 air bases, and, for all purposes, their air force was completely destroyed. In comparison, Israel had lost 17 planes and 5 pilots. Israel pleaded with Jordan, even after their troops had fired upon Israel, not to enter the war, but Hussein went ahead anyways, bombing West Jerusalem. From noon until 2 p.m., Syria, Jordan, and Iraq all launched their fighter jets at Israel, but all of them were either shot down or repelled, and by the end of day 1, Israel had destroyed more than 400 Arab planes and taken full control of the skies. Israel entered Egyptian-occupied Gaza and cut it off from the rest of Egypt, all in day 1. On June 6, the Jewish soldiers saw an opportunity and broke through the wall separating Jerusalem, moving towards the Western Wall. Because of faulty intel, Israeli troops invaded Ammunition Hill, a Jordanian stronghold that had been since reinforced. Israel lost 35 soldiers and 71 Jordanian soldiers died, making it one of the bloodiest battles in the entire Arab-Israeli conflict. Still, by the next day, Israel captured the Old City. For the first time in thousands of years, Jews controlled both the Temple Mount and the Western Wall. Just 2 days after the war had started, Israel had completely incapacitated Egypt and Jordan, but Naser still refused to sign a ceasefire, wanting a clause for Israel to leave the Sinai completely. But that wasn't going to happen. In the north, Syria had made no effort whatsoever to invade Israel, and most of the Israeli leadership was mostly against invading to the north, as escalation could open up a front too massive for Israel to handle. However, after Syria's threats to cut water to Israel and years of regular Syrian shelling into northern Israel, they decided to enter the Golan Heights. The Israeli military commander in the north, mistaking Syrian forces for collapsing, ordered the invasion. Dayan tried to stop the attack, but it was too late. Over 100 Israeli soldiers were killed and hundreds injured, but by June 9th, Syrian defenses were collapsing and Israel had taken the upper hand. Israel occupied Quneitra, just 40 miles from Damascus, forcing Syria to sign a ceasefire. At 6:30 p.m. on June 10th, the war was over. Just 132 hours. Egypt had lost 15,000 men, and thousands were injured and missing, and just 15% of the entire army supplies remained intact. 700 Jordanian soldiers had been killed, with over 6,000 missing or wounded. Syria lost just 450 men, but 2,000 were injured. Israel, on the other hand, lost, at the highest estimates, 800 soldiers, with 2,500 wounded. Israel in total gained 42,000 square miles of land, more than tripling its original size, including Gaza, the Sinai, the West Bank, and the Golan Heights. Back in 1948, some 700,000 Arabs had left Israel and entered the neighboring countries, becoming, for the most part, permanent refugees. However, they were now subjugated to Israeli rule. Some 1 million Palestinians in the West Bank and Gaza were now the focus of international concern. Israel would eventually return the Sinai to Egypt in return for Egypt recognizing their right to exist, and in 1993, under the Oslo Accords, ceded large amounts of the West Bank for autonomous Palestinian self-rule, and in 2005, Israel unilaterally withdrew from Gaza, bringing all Jewish settlers with them.